Raina Zeller yanked her wrist free with a sharp breath, her heels scraping against the high-end restaurant's marble floor as she backed away from the man whose grip had just tightened a little too much. "Come on, Raina." "Don't be dramatic," Trent said, his voice low but edged with irritation as he reached for her again. "I said no," she snapped, her voice firm, her cheeks flushed not from embarrassment but fury. She had agreed to one drink, not an entire evening of dodging unwanted hands and fake compliments. People were starting to look now. Couples paused mid-bite, a waiter froze with a tray of champagne glasses, and then, just like that, someone stepped between them. A man, tall, broad-shouldered. His navy suit was sharp as hell, his presence overwhelming. Raina had no idea who he was, but he stood in front of her like a wall, like a shield. "I think she said no," the stranger said coolly, his voice deep and calm but with a dangerous edge. Trent narrowed his eyes. "This doesn't concern you, it does now." The man didn't flinch. "Leave," Trent scoffed, but when the stranger didn't move an inch, he finally spat out a curse and stormed toward the exit. Raina exhaled, her knees unsteady. She hadn't realized how tense her body had been until the man turned around, his eyes locked onto hers. They were ocean blue and too intense for comfort. "You okay?" he asked, voice quieter now. She nodded, her throat dry. "Yeah, thank you," he nodded once. "I'm Branson Adler." Of course he had a name like that, smooth, commanding, she should have known. His whole presence screamed expensive. "Raina Zeller," she replied, trying to sound composed even though her heart was still hammering. He glanced behind her. "You shouldn't have to deal with someone like that." "I thought he was decent," she muttered, brushing hair from her face. "Clearly I was wrong." Branson looked at her for a second longer than necessary. "Would you like to sit down? I was just about to order dinner," she blinked. "What?" he shrugged. "You look like you could use a decent meal, and I swear I won't try anything." Raina hesitated. Everything in her life lately had been a mess: dead-end job, overdue rent, and now a failed date. Sitting with a stranger should be the last thing on her mind, but something about him felt safe. "Okay," she said softly. "Just dinner." He led her to a private corner booth away from the stairs. When the waiter returned, Branson rattled off a wine list so expensive it made her dizzy. He didn't even check prices. "Are you always this prepared?" she asked, half laughing. He gave a small grin. "Let's just say I know what good wine is." As dinner arrived, steak so tender it melted on the tongue, and a truffle risotto that made her want to cry, Raina found herself relaxing. She didn't expect to talk this much, or laugh this much, or feel so seen. "You're not from here, are you?" he asked. "Born here, raised in Ohio," she replied. "Moved back after college. I'm a graphic designer, freelance, which is just a fancy way of saying I live off coffee and pray clients pay on time." Branson leaned back, studying her. "You're funny." "Is that rare in women you meet?" he chuckled. "Not the kind who chase money." She tilted her head. "And what kind do you chase?" His eyes darkened a little. "The kind who don't care about it." Raina's brows lifted. "You make that sound like a confession." "I guess it is." She didn't ask him what he did for a living. She didn't need to. The way the staff practically bowed when he spoke, the way he ordered without hesitation, the Rolex on his wrist and the black card he handed over without blinking, it all spoke for itself. He was rich. Not just a little. A lot. When he walked her outside hours later, the city had quieted. His car, a sleek black Mercedes Maybach, waited at the curb. "Let me take you home," he said gently. She paused. "I can call a cab." "I know," he said, "but I want to make sure you get home safe." She wanted to say no, she really did, but she nodded instead. The ride was quiet, not awkward. Just calm. Branson didn't ask to come up when they reached her apartment. He didn't linger. He just walked her to the door like a gentleman. "Thanks again," she said, suddenly unsure what to do with her hands. He looked at her for a long second. "You deserve better than the kind of guy who doesn't listen," she smiled faintly. "I don't usually get rescued by strangers. I don't usually interfere in other people's dates," he replied. "But then again, I don't usually meet women who make me want to." Raina's breath caught. He stepped back, gave her one last look, then turned and disappeared down the stairs. She didn't sleep that night. She kept thinking about him. 2 days later, he showed up at her work cafe. She was hunched over her laptop with headphones on, editing a client logo for the 5th time when a voice broke through the noise. "Thought I'd find you here." She looked up and there he was. In jeans and a leather jacket this time, but still Branson, still too handsome. He held out a coffee. "Still like oat milk lattes, right?" Her lips parted. "How did you said it at dinner," he said simply. "I remember things." Her heart thudded. "Why are you here?" He stepped closer. "Because I can't stop thinking about you." Her throat tightened. He set the coffee down beside her laptop. "I'm not asking for anything, just dinner again, no pressure." She should say no, but she couldn't. "Okay," she whispered. He smiled. "Tomorrow night," she nodded. And just like that, Branson Adler, the man who had stepped into her life like a storm, was stepping deeper into it. And she had no idea how much her world was about to change. Raina hesitated outside the tall glass doors of Le Jardin Céleste, her coat pulled tight against the brisk wind threading through Manhattan. She didn't belong here. Not in a restaurant where the host wore cufflinks, and the valet inspected her boots like they were a foreign object. But Branson had sent a car, and when she'd stepped out, a maitre d' had been waiting with her name on a card. He was already seated when she was led to him, tucked into a curved velvet bench beneath a chandelier that looked like it cost more than her entire apartment. He stood when he saw her. "You're early," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "I couldn't wait," he replied without hesitation. She couldn't tell if it was a line or the truth. But it didn't matter. The way he said it quietly, like it wasn't meant to impress, made her pulse jump. A waiter appeared with no menu, just a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Branson nodded once, and the bottle was opened without a word. "You order without looking," she said, lifting a brow. "I have a few favorites," he said, pouring for her first. "Try it." She did. It was smooth, warm, with a finish that lingered. She didn't ask what it was. "I've been thinking about what you said," he said, watching her over the rim of his glass. "I said a lot of things." "No," he said. "You didn't. You let me talk." "You listened more than anyone has in a long time." She tilted her head. "You sound like someone who's very used to being heard." His mouth quirked. "Maybe, but being heard isn't the same as being understood." She didn't know what to say to that. A course was placed in front of her, something delicate and artfully arranged. She barely recognized half of it, but it tasted like magic. "You still freelance?" he asked. "For now." He nodded. "What would you do if money wasn't a factor?" She blinked. "Excuse me? If you didn't have to worry about rent, bills, any of it, what would you do?" She stared at him, fork paused midair. "That's not how life works. But if it could." She set her fork down. "I'd open a design studio, small, just mine, no clients dictating every pixel. Maybe work with nonprofits, schools, places that actually need good design but can't afford it." He leaned back, considering her. "You've thought about this." "Of course I have. Doesn't mean it's ever going to happen." "Why not?" She laughed softly. "Because I don't have a spare 100,000 lying around. You might not always need it." She narrowed her eyes. "Are you offering something?" "Not yet," he said. "Just listening." The next course came and went. Dessert followed, something with gold leaf and a name she couldn't pronounce, and through it all, Branson kept asking questions. Not small talk, real ones. About who she was, what she wanted, what she feared, and she began asking back. "What about you?" she asked, setting down her spoon. "What did you want before all this?" He looked out the window, jaw tightening slightly. "I wanted to build something, not just make money. I thought if I worked hard enough, I could create something lasting. Something better than what I came from." "What did you come from?" He looked back at her. "A father who barely looked up from his ledger long enough to remember my name, a mother who left before I hit 10, and a house where silence meant safety." The air between them shifted. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Don't be. It taught me how to survive." He paused. "But I never really learned how to stop surviving." She nodded slowly. "Maybe that's not something you do alone." He looked at her like she'd cracked something open. When they left the restaurant, the wind had picked up. The driver opened the door, but Branson didn't move. Instead, he turned to her, his gaze sharp. "I don't know what this is yet," he said, "but I want to find out." She hesitated. "You're not exactly a simple guy." "No," he agreed. "But I don't want complicated with you." She held his eyes. "Then don't make it complicated." He stepped closer, not enough to touch, just enough for her to feel the heat of him. "I want to see you again," he said. "Okay, tomorrow." She raised a brow. "You always this impatient," he nodded once, "when something's worth it." The next day, she didn't go to the cafe. She found a note in her mailbox instead, hand-delivered. A single cream envelope with her name in clean, confident script inside, an address and a time. She wasn't sure what to expect when she arrived at the location. It wasn't a restaurant or a rooftop. It was a gallery closed to the public, lights dimmed low, and Branson waiting inside beside an installation of floating glass panels and colored light. "You brought me to an art exhibit," she asked, stunned. "You said you liked immersive design." "I did," he nodded. "When you talked about that exhibit in Berlin, I had this one brought over for the month." She turned to him, stunned. "You brought the entire exhibit here." "It was easier than flying you to Germany on a weekday." She blinked. "That's not normal." "I'm not trying to be normal." She stepped into the light, letting it wash over her. It shifted as she moved, blues fading to amber, then to soft rose. It was magic. He watched her, not saying a word. She turned back. "Why are you doing this?" "You changed something," he said simply. "I don't know how, but everything feels different since the moment I saw you." She didn't know what to say, so she didn't say anything at all. Instead, she walked up to him, heart racing, and reached for his hand. His fingers closed around hers like it was the most natural thing in the world. And for the first time in a long time, Raina didn't feel like she was waiting for something to go wrong. She felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The door swung open before Raina could knock, and Branson stood there barefoot, sleeves rolled to his elbows, the top 2 buttons of his shirt undone. The scent of roasted garlic and something citrusy drifted out behind him. "You cook now?" she asked, stepping inside, her coat damp from the rain. "I thought I'd try something different," he said, taking it from her and hanging it on a walnut peg. "You've never tasted my cooking. Because most men in your tax bracket don't go near a stove." He picked up a wine glass from the counter and handed it to her. "That's what makes this interesting." The loft was warm, spacious, and scattered with signs of recent use. A cutting board dusted with lemon zest, a pan still sizzling on the range, an open cookbook laid face down beside a bowl of chopped herbs. She noticed a record playing in the background, an old jazz tune with horns that curled like smoke. "I thought you'd live in something more polished," she said, taking in the exposed brick and worn leather furniture. "I've had polished," he said, stirring something on the stove. "It feels like a showroom. I wanted a place I could breathe." She leaned against the counter. "You're full of surprises," he glanced over. "You haven't seen dinner yet." They ate at a small table near a window streaked with rain, the city glowing faintly beyond it. The food was good, and not just good for a millionaire who cooked. There were layers of flavor she hadn't expected, and she found herself scraping the last of the sauce with a piece of bread. "All right," she said, pointing her fork at him. "That was actually incredible." He looked pleased. "My mother taught me one thing before she left: how to make sea bass without overcooking it." She paused. "You've never mentioned her," he shrugged. "I don't mention a lot of things." "Why not?" "Because most people only want the version of me that fits their expectations." "And what version is that?" "The one with no flaws, no shadows, just the money, the reputation, the dinner reservations." She set her fork down. "I'm not most people." "I know," he said quietly. "That's why it's terrifying." Her heart stuttered. "Terrifying how?" He looked straight at her. "Because I can't control it. You're not predictable. You don't care what I can buy. You don't need me. And yet, I can't stop wanting to be around you." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for her wine and took a sip, letting the words settle between them. "I'm not trying to change you," she said finally. "I think that's exactly why you are," he said. "Without even trying." After dinner, he offered her the couch, but she followed him instead, not to his bedroom, but to the rooftop. He grabbed an umbrella and a blanket, and they climbed the stairs to a small terrace lit with low amber bulbs. The city stretched around them like a living thing, wet and pulsing with light. He wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and stood beside her, silent. "I used to come up here when I couldn't sleep," he said. "Something about the noise calms me." "You're not what I expected," she said. "Neither are you," she looked at him. "What did you expect? Someone who'd see the headlines and want a piece of the life attached to them." "I don't read the headlines. That's what makes you dangerous." She turned toward him. "I'm not dangerous. You are to someone like me." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. When they went back inside, she helped him clear the table, even though he tried to stop her. They moved around each other easily, like they'd done it 100 times before. As she dried the last plate, she said, "Do people know this version of you?" "No. Why not?" "Because I've never given anyone a reason to stay long enough to see it." She set the towel down and faced him. "Maybe you've just never met the right person." He stepped closer. "Maybe I have now." She didn't pull away when he reached for her face. His hand was warm against her cheek, his thumb brushing just beneath her eye. "I don't want to mess this up," he said. "Then don't." He kissed her, slow and certain, and she felt something shift inside her, like the floor had tilted just enough to make her forget every reason she should be cautious. When she left that night, he didn't ask her to stay. But he did walk her to the car, holding her hand the entire way. The next morning, she woke to a delivery on her doorstep, not flowers, not jewelry, a portfolio case inside, a limited lease offer on a small storefront in Soho. A key and a note. "I believe in your studio more than any client ever could. Open it. Build it. Make it yours." No signature. Just a phone number she already had memorized. She stood there in her hallway, stunned, the key cold in her hand. And for the first time since she'd met Branson Adler, she didn't feel like the underdog. She felt like someone who could change everything because she already had. The gallery was empty, its silence broken only by the soft echo of Raina's heels as she crossed the polished floors. She stood in the center of the space that would become her studio, the keys warm in her palm from being held too tightly. Sunlight poured in through the tall, arched windows, and even though the walls were bare, she could already picture it, panels hung with her work, worn desks stacked with sketches, the hum of creativity instead of the constant pressure to survive. When Branson walked in, he didn't say anything at first. He just watched her, leaning against the doorframe, hands in the pockets of his coat. "I didn't know you were coming," she said without turning, voice quieter than she meant. "I wanted to see what it looked like when you realized it was real." She turned to face him. "It's too much." He stepped forward. "It's not. You can't just buy me a new life." "I didn't. I made space for the one you already wanted." Raina walked toward him, her expression unreadable. "This changes things." He held her gaze. "It's supposed to." "I don't know how to navigate this," she admitted. "I'm used to working for everything, scraping by, earning it." "I know," he said. "And that's exactly why I wanted to give you a different option. Not because you need help, but because you deserve support that doesn't come with demands." She studied him. "What do you want then?" "I want to be the person who doesn't make you choose between love and ambition." Her breath caught, but she recovered quickly. "You think this is love?" "I know it is." Raina looked away, her fingers tightening around the key. "What if I mess it up?" "You won't." "You don't know that." "I know you," he said. "And I know what it looks like when someone has the power to unravel me just by walking into a room." Her lips parted, but before she could respond, a voice called from behind them. "Branson." He turned as a woman stepped through the side door, her heels sharp against the floor. She was older, elegant, her presence immediate and commanding. "I wasn't expecting you until later," she said, eyeing Raina with subtle interest. "I moved the meeting," Branson said evenly. "This is Raina." The woman's smile was polite but cool. "The designer." Branson's jaw tightened. "The woman I'm with." Raina extended a hand. "It's nice to meet you." The woman shook it, then turned to Branson. "We need to finalize the board votes by tomorrow. They're expecting your signature." "I'll be there," he said. She gave him a pointed look, then left as quickly as she'd come. Raina waited until the door clicked shut. "That was your stepmother, wasn't it?" He nodded once. "She doesn't approve of anything that isn't strategic. She thinks I'm a distraction. She knows you're not. That's what makes her nervous." Raina crossed her arms. "Is this going to become a problem?" "No, because I won't let it." She studied him for a long moment before nodding. "All right." Later that week, the studio lease was signed and Branson didn't hover. He let her make decisions, gave her the freedom to negotiate her own terms with the property management team, even though they clearly answered to him. He showed up one afternoon with paint samples and quietly left them on her desk without interrupting her meeting. Each time he came around, it wasn't with answers. It was with space, but the distance between them wasn't growing. It was deepening. One evening, as she packed up fabric swatches and zoning papers, he sat on the floor beside her, legs stretched out, shirt sleeves rolled. He looked as tired as she felt. "You could be anywhere right now," she said, not looking at him. "Why are you here?" "Because this is where you are." She glanced at him, surprised at the simplicity of it. "You don't need me to build this," he continued. "But I want to be here while you do." Raina leaned against the wall, her voice soft. "I've never had that before." He looked at her then, eyes unguarded. "Neither have I." That night she brought him to her apartment for the first time. It was small, cluttered, and nothing like his penthouse, but he didn't seem to care. He sat on her worn couch, flipping through her old sketchbooks while she made tea. "You used to draw fashion," he said, holding up a page with a flowing gown sketched in charcoal. "I thought I'd work in couture," she said. "But then I realized I liked telling stories more than stitching fabric." "You still could," she shook her head. "It's not about could, it's about want, and I want this." He set the sketchbook down and walked over to her, sliding a hand around her waist. "I want all of it with you," he said. "The gallery openings, the late nights in this kitchen, the chaos, the quiet." She leaned into him, her forehead resting against his chest. "Then don't walk away when it gets messy." "I walked into a restaurant and stepped between you and a man who didn't deserve you," he said, voice low. "Do you really think I'd walk away from the one who changed everything?" She looked up at him, eyes shining. "So what happens next?" "I give you a ring," he said. "Not because I think you need one, but because I do." Her breath caught as he pulled a velvet box from his jacket pocket. He opened it, revealing a delicate gold band with a single sapphire, deep blue and unpolished. "It's not traditional," he said. "But neither are we." She didn't hesitate. "Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and she kissed him, her hands framing his face like she couldn't believe he was real. The next month, her studio opened to a crowd of clients, friends, and press. Branson stood quietly in the back, watching her shine. He didn't speak to reporters. He didn't take credit. He just caught her eye across the room and smiled like he'd already won everything that mattered. And when the night was over, when the lights dimmed and the crowd dispersed, he wrapped his arms around her from behind and whispered against her ear. "You changed my world, Raina Zeller." She turned in his arms, resting her forehead against his. "You changed mine first." They didn't need anything more than that. No headlines, no fanfare, just two people who had stepped into each other's lives at the exact moment they needed to, and stayed. The sound of soft applause faded as the last guest exited the gallery, leaving behind a trail of empty wine glasses and the scent of fresh peonies. Raina leaned against the glass door, her heels dangling from one hand, the adrenaline finally beginning to wear off. Her first solo exhibit, a visual fusion of her design and light installations, had been a sold-out success. She hadn't expected the mayor's cultural committee to show up or for 2 European buyers to request commissions. But none of that compared to the quiet joy of seeing her name etched on the plaque outside in brushed gold. Branson approached with 2 flutes of champagne, his tie loosened and his cufflinks removed. He handed her one, then raised his own. "To the woman who made the room stop breathing tonight," she smiled, leaning her head lightly against his shoulder. "You're biased. I'm not biased, I'm enchanted, he said, clinking his glass to hers. She looked up at him. You don't have to keep building me up, you know. I don't do it to build you up. I do it because I still haven't gotten used to the way you shine when you're doing exactly what you were meant to. The lights inside flickered as the automatic timers began to shut down. She took a small sip and let the silence stretch between them. I've been thinking, she said, about something you said that night on your rooftop. His brow lifted slightly. About not knowing how to stop surviving? No. About wanting to build something that lasts. He leaned against the wall beside her. And, I think I want to build it with you. He didn't smile, he didn't joke, he just took her hand steady and warm. Then we start now. The next few weeks were quietly transformative. They traveled upstate to meet a sculptor she'd long admired, and Branson surprised her by commissioning a piece for her studio courtyard without needing to ask how much it cost. She found herself waking up in his loft more often than her apartment, though neither of them acknowledged the shift. They didn't need to. It was already happening. One night, while Raina was curled up on the sofa sketching ideas for an interactive exhibit for a school program, Branson walked in holding a thick manila folder. He laid it on the table and sat beside her. I have something to show you. She set her sketchpad aside. Is it another property? He shook his head. No, it's the last thing tying me to the Adler board, she blinked. You're stepping down. I already did. I sold my remaining shares last week. The paperwork is final. She stared at him. But that company was your legacy. He looked at her without hesitation. No, that company was my father's legacy. I just spent years trying to prove I could hold it together better than he did. But I don't need to prove anything anymore, not to a board, not to an empire. She sat back slowly. What will you do instead? I've already started, he said. I'm launching a foundation for emerging designers, artists, architects, people like you, except not everyone gets lucky enough to be rescued in a restaurant. She touched his wrist. You didn't rescue me. He turned his hand over, lacing their fingers. No, you rescued me. Later that night, as the city buzzed quietly in the distance, Branson proposed again, not with a ring he'd already given her this time with a white envelope, inside a deed. To a brownstone in the West Village, 3 floors, a garden, room for her studio on the ground level and a home above it. I want to build our life there, he said simply. Not because it's perfect, but because it can be ours. She didn't speak. She just kissed him, long and deep, until the city melted away. 6 months later, they were married in the garden of that same brownstone. There were no press photographers, no event planners, just a string of lights, a handful of close friends, and her mother officiating with a tearful smile. Branson wore a simple navy suit, and Raina wore a gown with flowing sleeves she'd designed herself, nothing showy, just elegant and full of quiet power. When they exchanged vows, he promised her laughter in the mundane and strength in the storm. She promised him truth without judgment and love without fear. As they kissed beneath a canopy of white roses, rain threatened in the distance, but never came. Their honeymoon was spent in Tuscany, not in a resort, but a centuries-old villa tucked among olive trees and vineyards. They spent their mornings walking through the hills, and their evenings cooking together, barefoot and sun-drenched, back home. Raina's studio expanded into a mentorship program that partnered with Branson's foundation. They never worked in the same building, but their visions constantly overlapped, 2 halves of a shared dream. Branson started writing a book, something he hadn't done since college. Not about business, but about rebuilding identity after power, about letting go of legacy in order to build love. They didn't rush the rest of life. They didn't chase milestones. But 5 years later, when Raina stood in the garden again, this time barefoot, with a small girl clinging to her leg and paint streaked on her fingers, Branson watched from the kitchen window, coffee in hand, heart impossibly full. He stepped outside, lifted their daughter into his arms, and kissed Raina's temple. You still make the world stop, he whispered against her hair. She looked up at him, eyes soft and certain. Only because you taught me how to stand still long enough to feel it. And in that quiet haven they built together where art met legacy, and love outlasted the noise. They lived not perfectly, but fully, every single day.